In this video, I'm going to break down the truth and the reality of the dangers of bench pressing. The first thing I want you to understand is that bench pressing is inherently dangerous. There's no way to eliminate all of the risks involved with benching, and I will cover that in this video and maybe give you a better idea of how to gauge the risk-benefit factor for yourself. With any physical activity or exertion, especially weight training, there's always going to be risk, and I will cover the risks that are involved with bench pressing. To put into perspective how dangerous bench pressing is, a young man from China recently lost his life performing a 275-pound bench that he failed. The weight essentially went up to his neck and suffocated him, killing him. So if you're under the illusion that you could just tear your pec or maybe injure a rotator cuff bench pressing, you're definitely under an illusion, because you can indeed lose your life with what many would consider a moderate amount of weight. So what other risk factors are involved with benching besides dying, which is the most extreme? Well, there's a myriad of them, and many people don't even know about all of them. But I'll start with the obvious: blunt force trauma. If you do not die, a bench press that is failed with a significant amount of weight can do anything from giving you severe bruising to internal bleeding to broken bones, and so on and so forth. So you can have severe trauma from the bar impacting your body with the increased load on the bar. So of course, the heavier the bench press rep is that you're performing, the more dangerous that it becomes. So there's blunt force trauma. The next thing that you can experience from bench pressing, and you'll hear this a lot, people talk about avoiding this through proper warm-up, is rotator cuff or shoulder injuries. Shoulder injuries are very common with bench pressing. It's usually happening because someone is not retracting their scapula properly. But even with doing this, you'll hear from many people who do bench press that they still experience shoulder pain and shoulder impingements, etc., etc. Another injury that you might experience from bench pressing is tricep injuries, including tricep tears. Yes, it's rare, but they can happen on the bench press. One of the more common tears, though, on a bench press would be a pec tear. So your pectoral can actually tear in half. It can tear slightly, or it could tear completely off the bone performing a simple bench press. And depending on who you are, you can find videos on YouTube, for example, of this happening under a low amount of weight or a high amount of weight. I believe there's a YouTube video of someone tearing their pec with just 225 pounds, and the guy looks like a monster. So it doesn't really matter what type of weight it is. It really matters more on where the muscle's at and the condition of the muscle and tendons. Another injury that people experience with bench pressing is going to be tendonitis in their elbows, or severe elbow tendonitis and arthritis. This injury usually takes place over time and presents itself, after you've been benching for years. So that is a little bit more rare, but oftentimes also people who are novices and beginners complain about having elbow pain, which really cannot always be avoided because it just depends on the physiological makeup of your body oftentimes. And those are just some of, I think I covered the major ones of risk factors that are involved with benching. And I mention these because if you are thinking about starting to bench press, you should be aware of the potential risk factors before you do it. And then weigh those risk factors against other exercises that may accomplish the same thing for you. So many of you are probably familiar with the person in the screenshot here, UF powerlifter, an extremely strong man at a low body weight. And I'm featuring him in this video because himself, who I would consider a bench press specialist, still dropped, I think, upwards of 340 pounds onto his chest. So for those of you who are saying maybe I'm exaggerating the risks of bench pressing, or I'm trying to scare you, or maybe you think that you yourself, because you're stronger, you'll be able to avoid these pitfalls, the fact of the matter is there's tips and there's tricks to do some risk mitigation with bench press, but there's always a risk of hurting yourself when you're underneath that bar. So, what are a few ways that you can be a little safer with bench press and avoid some of these pitfalls? Well, I think the most cliche is don't ego lift. Ego lifting is essentially using the non logical part of your brain and using ego and hubris to say, hey, I'm going to do more than I know logically I should be doing at the moment. And that could be, I know I shouldn't be doing that because I have a tweak in my shoulder or my chest. Or because I know that I'm not fully recovered from yesterday's workout. Whatever that case may be logical, be safe. Nothing is worth hurting yourself, and definitely not worth killing yourself underneath the bar. So just don't use your ego and use your logical side of your brain and be safe. Besides that, I think it's really important, in my opinion, even though this is controversial, don't wrap your wrists. I think wrist wraps, kind of through social media, have been moved to like something that novices use, and novices never used to use wrist wraps. Wrist wraps are actually for people who have extremely strong foundational strength in their wrists, and they're using it to take them over the edge because they're using a ton of weight. A novice shouldn't use wrist wraps because think about it like this: if you use wrist wraps, since you start benching and you get up to 315 pounds, and someone takes off your wrist wraps and says hit your PR, do you think that that's safe? Do you think your wrists have been fortified through time, that your tendons have gradually got stronger, that your little muscles and stabilizer muscles have actually gained strength through time? Of course they haven't. So I'm never big on wrist wraps. Let's say, for example, you go to the gym and you forget your wrist wraps and you bench anyways, which people do. That's like playing with fire. So I'm not big on wrist wraps. And the last and probably the most obvious one is, without a doubt, make sure to use a spotter. Always use a spotter if possible, even though it can be inconvenient and it's not realistic. It's not realistic for myself, actually. So I definitely do bench and I understand the risks, and I do it, even understanding the risks, I still do it, and I still do bench without a spotter. But what a spotter can do is save you from the weight. 90% of the time, they will not catch the bar if you just drop it, but they will prevent you from having even more serious subsequent injuries than you would have had if you were by yourself. And also, most of the time, what a spotter is going to do is when you fail, they're going to help you to re-rack the weights. And a spotter can also help take your training to the next level because they can give you some slight assistance and help you hit failure points that you otherwise would have never been able to hit on your own doing a lone bench press. So those are the three main advices that I would give people to be more safe. Ultimately, if you're going to perform the bench press, it's going to be up to you. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from benching. Of course, ironically, I think that people should bench. I think it's a great movement for strength. It's one of those prime movers that when you do them and you accomplish a higher weight, you feel pretty dang good about yourself. And let's be honest, it's one of those lifts that are like very appealing, and they're ego-driven lifts to where, if you hit 3 plates in a commercial gym, people will strike up conversations with you just based off the fact that you hit 3 plates. That's a fact. That's kind of associated with bench press, which makes it more attractive to a lot of guys. I guess, and girls out there. There's girls who bench as well. But I think it's good. It's a good exercise to perform. I just wanted to make this so you understand the risks that are associated with this movement. And then, from there, if you want to perform bench or not, that decision is completely up to you.